Hello, my name is Noelia and I will be your host today. Marco Bucci is with me today, and he will be teaching us how to tackle landscapes with digital techniques. So, before we get started, make sure if you want to follow along today, make sure you are going to www.krita.org so that you can get the software for it, which is free for you to use. And I will be dropping that in the chat as well. And as always, if you have any questions, type question in all caps in the chat, followed by your question so that I can find it easily. We will be answering as many questions as we can today. And if they are relevant to what Marco is doing, I will be asking it at that time. If not, I'll be saving it for a Q&A at the end. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click on the notifications button so that you know when we are live, and share this link with your friends. Okie doke. Before we get started, Marco, do you want to show us some of your stuff and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, well, hey everyone. Thank you for that intro, Noelia. It's good to be here. Many of you, some of you may know me from my YouTube channel. I do a lot of teaching about painting and stuff like that. I'm really big on plein air painting, which is when you paint outdoors, capturing, nature from life, where you're actually standing out there. So, I got to share my screen, don't I? Hang on. This would be a good time to share my screen.
Yeah, that way we can see.
I'm a first-time live streamer, everyone.
Marco, quick question.
Yeah.
Krita should work on iPads, right?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The Krita software should work on iPads.
Ooh, I don't know about that actually. I'm not so sure about that. I think it may only be a like PC or Mac, like desktop thing.
Okay.
But if you want, I think there's a free software for iPads called Brushes, I think it's called. You can try that. Like the big one is Procreate, but that costs a little bit of money. And if you want something just for free, like Krita is free, try Brushes. But Krita may be available for iPad. I'm not sure that it is. All right. And by the way, yeah, feel free to pour in the questions. I'm looking forward to answering as many of those as I can. Yeah, so you can see my screen, right, guys?
Yep.
Okay, so this is an example of a plein air painting. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit on this. It's painted from life. As you can see, I'm standing out here. This is in Lausanne, Switzerland, when I was doing a lot of traveling a few years ago. I used to live in Germany. My wife had a job there for 3 years, and I'm a freelancer, so I can work from anywhere. So I tagged along, and we lived in Germany for 3 years, and we got to travel all over Europe. It was amazing. So I have sketchbooks like this filled with European scenes. And let's see. Hang on a second. When you're zoomed in, it won't let you switch. This is Italy. And I do a lot of, you notice they're very small sketches.
Mm-hmm.
I used to paint large when I was outside, like, these really big 11 by 14 canvases. And first of all, they would take forever. And second of all, I would never be able to finish them because the light moves so quickly when you're outdoors. And, I wanted something that I could get done quick. And also when you're painting large, I would have this big backpack and I would always be so tired at the end of the day because you're lugging around this whole tripod setup. So, thankfully this is where Etcher comes in. A lot of these are done with my little Etcher setups. Like I've got 2 different bags here. I've got the small.
Oh, people can't see that, Marco. You'll have to unshare your screen so they can see you.
Can they see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have this little etcher pack here. This is the travel one that just slings over my shoulder, and it's super lightweight. You open it up, you can see I've got a few things in here already. I just, you throw a sketchbook in there. I use, where's my etcher sketchbook here? This is a brand new one. I've got these little etcher watercolor sketchbooks. They fit perfectly in here. You got space for your brushes and all your tools and little pockets. And yeah, I travel with that a lot. And if I want something larger, I use this etcher bag. And this one can fit an iPad. It's got little handy little straps for, you know, you can strap on an iPad there or your sketchbook. And both of these are great. And really, that's the kind of thing that's enabled me to paint. Let me share my screen again here.
Yeah.
And these are all, like, you're seeing this pretty zoomed in. This is a tiny little sketch. Let me just keep going through these. They're probably like 20 to 30 minutes, and the medium is watercolor with white gouache. I mix some white gouache in there to help the watercolor be a little bit opaque.
Mm-hmm.
It helps, you know, I like painting pure watercolor, but when you're painting so tiny, sometimes the paper gets sopped up with water too much. So the white gouache helps you to put some opacity in, so you don't have to wait for drying time so much. This one I think it is pure watercolor. You can see a lot of sploshes and splashes. And I'm just trying to capture, like, this was a good example of, you can imagine how quickly this light goes away. This is obviously a sunset sort of thing. The sun is actually already behind those buildings in the distance. And I probably had 10 minutes to paint that. So that's why it's so splotchy. But doing this kind of thing really will train your ability to react to shapes and values very quickly. And it also drill your compositional skills. Like, for example, just like how you distribute your shapes. So in this one, you're thinking about focal point first, not just with this one, with anything. I'm thinking like this awning here, that's the focal point, which is why it's drawn with crisp edges and high contrast. Those are common tools for focal points to get the viewer to look there. And then I scattered, see these small shadow shapes? I scattered them sort of around the focal point. This is a technique you can, it's not like you do this all the time, but I tried to keep the focal point kind of bare, and then everything else has more spattery small shapes. And it kind of, you know, helps support the contrast of the focal point. And that's the kind of thing that these small sketches will really, really help drill. This one, as you can see in my notes here, cold. This is Neuschwanstein in Germany. And oh boy, it was cold that day. My hands were literally freezing and I couldn't move very well. And that's why the brush strokes look like they do. But a sketch like this, I'll show you later, just in a few seconds in the slideshow, it made its way to a studio painting. I'll show you that in a second. This is a quick sunset. Again, this light moves very quickly. Here is a little street sketch. You know, emphasis on the looseness. Like if you look at those cars, they're almost not even cars, right? They're just splotches of paint. And this is the type of stuff that it depends on what you're interested in capturing. When I'm out there, I'm interested in capturing just almost like a gesture. If any of you guys have ever drawn like gestures from the human figure, this is like the painting equivalent of that. It's almost like a gestural painting. I'm just trying to quickly get the sense of looking through some of these leaves. They're just splotches, right? I'm not trying to paint leaves, they're just splotches, trying to look through the leaves, see the light raking through this street. Here's the subject we're going to be painting today, Prague. I was in Prague in 2010, I think it was, painting these. And Prague is amazing for painters because there's just so many compositions waiting for you, big, medium, and small shapes. No matter where you are in Prague, you can see these big towers. And here's one in the morning, and then here's that same scene in the sunset. So the sun is setting here, and then I went back in the morning and painted the sun hitting them more straight on. And you can see how small the sketch is, right? There's my thumb right there. And you know, the sketch is what, maybe 2.5 to 3 inches tall. It's incredibly small. Little brushstrokes gain such a giant meaning when the sketch is small. And what that does is just trains your mark making. And we're going to talk about that as we move into digital paint today. Just thoughts about making marks on the canvas and painting things that look like they capture real life, but very simply. Here's Stockholm, Sweden. Just some plein air paintings that I think these are from Paris. There's a little pencil there for size reference. Yeah, sometimes I do them on the same board. This is all on one 8x10 board, 8x10 inch board. This is from the Bahamas. And I went to Rome, and this was a couple days worth of Venice, sorry. A couple days worth of paintings from Venice. There's Copenhagen. And, you know, just trying to get a sense for the space that I'm in, the light that's hitting them. Oh, there's the studio painting. So the Neuschwanstein castle painting, the painting plus some photo reference. Sometimes I'll take photo reference when I'm there. Made its way to this. This was done as a wedding gift for some friends who I was traveling with. The grammatical error is on purpose, folks. So don't get on me for that. Uh, oh, and here's the painting that inspired what we're going to do today. This is Prague. This is again watercolor with some white gouache. And yeah, just looking over the rooftops. Rooftops playing peekaboo with some towers kind of making themselves known by sticking out the tops of these roofs. Some nice distance here. The thing I like about this scene, I use this for demos. I have used this for demos before, is because there's not a whole lot of drawing required. There is drawing, but it's all very simple shapes. But it has a lot of depth. It has a lot of color. So I do like this for demos. I think this scene is very accessible for painters of all levels. So we'll be using this one, a digital version of this. Anyway, so that's that. If you, just to quickly finish off the slideshow, if you go to my website, which is marcobucci.com, and just go to personal, this is where all of those outdoor studies like manifest, is in the studio work. You look at a painting like this and you can see that it's got the same kind of sensibility, the same type of almost sporadic, frantic capturing of the light, but it's more finished though. I'm more specific about the nature of the drawing and the rendering and the edges, but I still want to maintain that really painterly look. Just to go through some of these here, you can see that this is where people talk about style. Like to me, style is just your personality. And for me, ever since I can remember, I have always wanted to do things with a loose sensibility, but still have them look finished. I'm inspired by painters like Sargent and Zorn and Sorolla, who have had that aesthetic, who are masters of that aesthetic. Again, the aesthetic being very loose and energetic, but still finished looking. Sometimes it's possible to paint so loose that it doesn't look finished. I hope that these are good examples of things that are loose yet still finished.
Yeah.
I think something is finished when it has good relationships of shapes and values and edges. And we'll talk about all those things as we go with the demo. Whereas something that's too sketchy, it can, things may be a little too on the soft side or too on the hard side, and not really experimenting with the whole gamut of values or shapes or edges. Whereas these, even though they're fairly loose, I try to make sure that they have, that full range of value, different hard versus soft versus firm edges and things like that. It's a Halloween one. Yeah, okay. So that gives you an idea of the type of work I do. Sometimes I do tighter stuff, like if you go into my professional section, sometimes I do really like graphic, tighter stuff like this. Or sometimes I get to do painterly stuff that's a bit tighter, like stuff like this for Disney's Nutcracker, illustrations for the film. They're a bit tighter, but still they have that, I think, that painterly quality to them. We'll be looking at portrait stuff in my mini workshop, actually, with Etcher in a few weeks. Okay, so I think that's, you guys can check out the site and, get a sense for the different types of stuff that I like to do. It's all within the range of painterly, though. Here's a more tightly rendered one, but still, fairly loose. I think I'm trying to straddle that gap between sketchy and finished. That's constantly a battle for me. Constantly the aesthetic I'm going for.
Awesome.
All right. Are there any questions before I get into things, or?
Not really, other than about the software. And I guess something important to mention is that what you will be teaching us today, Marco, doesn't rely on Krita specifically, right?
That's right. Yeah, so I'm using Krita, which is free, and no, you do not have to use Krita. I'm not going to be doing anything special. In fact, I use Krita, but my main software is Photoshop. Krita, I'm only using Krita today because it's free and you guys can kind of follow along with what I'm doing. And for those of you maybe new to digital painting, you can just grab a copy of Krita and sort of follow along. But I'll preface this with, I will probably stumble around for brushes and stuff because I don't use Krita that often. So this is kind of a really honest look at the process because it's still a bit raw for me. I mean, I've used Krita a little bit, so I kind of know what I'm doing, but not as nearly as well as I do in Photoshop.
Awesome.
All right.
Quick question.
Yeah.
What would you suggest for someone who has a hard time getting more loose and less tightly rendered?
Well, it's a good thing that you're here with us today because that's what we're going to be looking at. So I'll let that answer play out over the demo if that's okay, because that's
Awesome.
almost exactly what we're going to be talking about.
Perfect.
Okay, so let's get going. And Noelia, please interrupt with any questions as they come up. I've been teaching for more than 10 years. I'm used to talking while painting.
Okie doke, will do.
So in Krita here, can I move my zoom? Actually, no, it's okay. If you go to Window and go to Workspace and just click Big Paint, you'll get you'll get this, and then you can just drag your color picker out here, which I like to do. And I'm gonna make a new layer by clicking this plus button. Actually, I think if you load Krita, that layer will already be there, I think. And what I'm going to do is, obviously there's my prog reference. And I'm just gonna grab the line tool, which is, see here I am looking for it. Oh, there it is. I've already clicked it. I'm gonna make some lines. You just kind of click and drag. And hold on a second. I wanna move my zoom interface, but I don't know how to do that.
While you're figuring that out, for everyone joining us today, the reference images are listed in the description of the video, but I will be posting them in the chat right now just in case. But that's where you can find them.
I will actually be loading those myself, and I'll put them on the screen when I'm using them.
Cool.
The two references images I'm going to use are, yeah, this one and that one. I'll be cycling between them because they have just shape references and, mostly shape references and some lighting reference. I'm just going to throw that on my other screen. I will bring that to the forefront when I'm looking at them. So if you guys should, if you're following along though, definitely load them up and you can sort of see what I'm getting at. But I'm mainly looking at my own sketch here, which was inspired by me actually being in Prague. But the photo references are great. And by the way, while I'm going here, I have the line tool. My opacity slider's up here. So if you go low opacity, the line is, very thin or very transparent. If you go high opacity, it's thick, and you pick your colors, obviously. And I don't even care that the lines aren't straight. This already gets to the question we just had a second ago about tightness versus looseness. The number one thing with painting loose is developing the, ability, to be okay with strokes that you don't think are perfect, because they will become fine as you work. I used to think, let me get the brush tool here. I used to think that I could determine whether a stroke was correct right after I made it. I've learned that you can't. Not only I can't, but I don't think anyone really can, because you don't know what it's going to be up against in terms of what its neighbors are going to do, what other strokes are going to do around it. You know what? I'm going to grab the line tool. I'm going to use the line tool because a lot of these lines have to be straight, and in Krita, the line tool is the best way to sort of do that. So I'm just going to start to rough in a composition. I'm not thinking about how to draw buildings or how to draw landscapes, really. I'm just thinking about shapes. If you look at my original, there's this rhythm to it. Whoops, let me go on the fog layer here. There's this sort of V shape. You guys kind of see that, how it's sort of this V shape. I'm thinking about that. And the thing that breaks up the V shape are these little towers that are little vertical extrusions from the V shape. Even the landscape kind of follows this triangular thing. So that's what I'm thinking about at first. This is a composition question. Whenever you're painting, composition is the number one thing you are trying to do. It doesn't matter what you're painting. It could be a simple portrait in the middle of the page. It can be a landscape like this, of any complexity. The number one problem you have is composition. What is it that you are trying to do rhythmically throughout the page? So watch this. I'll even draw in this V. I undo a lot, by the way. Control Z is undo, like any other app. I have it mapped to my stylus, though. Can they see me on the camera, Noelia, or not?
No, they cannot.
Okay, so I'm not going to gesture on the camera. I was just trying to show what my undo button is, which is just my tablet pen switch, the front switch, because I use undo a lot, which is a nice thing that you have with digital that you don't really have with traditional, which, by the way, is another good feature of traditional painting. is that you don't have undo, which means you learn much quicker with traditional to be direct and accept your strokes. With digital, you can toil forever in not knowing, and that's kind of a bad thing. So I am putting down some line tool. I'll switch to the brush tool here, and I'll continue to sketch this in. You can access your brushes up here or down here. I like to go to this top one, and I'll just switch to the sketch icon here, and then I can have pencils. I'll just maybe click this sort of textury pencil here. And I like to turn my opacity way down. This is at like 19. And I sketch with like a, medium gray, medium dark gray. And if you use the square bracket keys, you can change the size, or just hold shift and drag, and you can change the size of your brush. There's a big pencil, hold shift, drag, there's a small pencil. So I do that a lot. I will constantly be changing my brush size as I go. Okay, so the other thing about not getting mired in detail and like rendering is don't worry about exactly where things go in terms of the reference. Like you notice as I paint this, hang on a second. All right, I have 2 layers here. I only want 1 layer. There we go. Just merge this layer. Yeah, so I'm only working on 1 layer, by the way. I'm not too precious about where individual windows are or individual elements of the picture. As you can see with the reference, things exist everywhere. And what I mean is windows and chimneys, they're kind of all over the place. It doesn't matter if you move them around. No one's going to care. It doesn't matter if you change sizes of things or anything like that. But the one thing that I am going to try and do is this is very basic, make sure that the shapes are larger in the foreground and smaller progressively to the background, because that's what depth does. We can see bigger rooftops in the foreground and smaller as they go back. I am going to be faithful to that because that will determine the depth of the scene. So I spend obviously it's going to take me a bit longer today because I'm speaking while I'm drawing and painting, but I spend about like 2 to 3 minutes usually roughing this in. Although I'm hesitant to tell you guys times because I don't want you guys to think like, oh, Marco spends 3 minutes, that means I have to spend 3 minutes. No, like I used to spend a lot longer, but as you gain experience, you get faster. And you also learn what you need versus what you don't need, which is a really insightful thing like a gift you can give to yourself as an artist, is learning what you need to be comfortable and what you can discard. And everyone's going to be different there. So here I'm just throwing some small shapes in the background. There's going to be a tower over here. So I'm just going to rough that guy in. Oops. There we go. Something like this. Okay. I'm going to switch to painting mode here.
Awesome.
Just like a mental switch. And any questions in the chat there?
One actually.
Okay.
What digital tablet are you using?
Oh yeah, I'm using a very old Wacom Intuos 3. They don't even sell these anymore. It's a 6x12 model. Again, I bought this in like 2004. There are much better versions of it now, but I do like the Wacom brand. They're very reliable. So, but any tablet you have is going to work. So there's nothing special about the tablet I'm using. I'm trying to find a brush here. Let's try this brush. I'm going to make a new layer with this plus button, and I will put it underneath my line drawing just by dragging it down. And this will allow me to just, paint underneath the lines. I'm going to do what I usually do when I plein air paint. I'm going to rough in just some color. Actually, this isn't really color. It's just an underpainting. I'm not trying to paint things, their actual colors. I'm just doing an underpainting to kill some of the white of the page. And this can, as you can see it in my sketch there, the orangey stuff. Sometimes I don't even paint over it. What this does is it gives your color temperature something to play off of. Oh, by the way, holding Control or Command will sample. So your brush turns into a sample tool, which means you can select colors on your painting. This is cool. Like the closest thing to a palette. Those of us who work with traditional paint, we have palettes, right? You pick up paint off your palette and apply it. In digital, you don't really have palettes, but you can, your painting is the palette. You can sample it with the Control key. And you can see as I click, Krita shows you what color you're about to sample. You can see it updating, right? Now, don't worry, I'm not going to sample from my finished painting. I'm going to pick every color myself with, my color picker here. Whoops. Okay, yeah, Krita's annoying with this. I just docked my color picker. I want to drag that back out, and then you got to resize it.
No.
Krita, thank you. Exactly what I wanted. But then, again, I'm not used to Krita. See, I just did it again. I'm not used to Krita. I'm used to Photoshop. Seasoned Krita users will be like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, we have someone in the chat who actually uses Krita all the time. Their name on the chat is Storm Engineer, and they said that if you have any trouble with Krita, you can ask them. They are used to the program. It's their main program.
Thanks, Storm Engineer. I recognize your nickname from Discord and Twitter. I think that's you. Okay, so let me talk about color. The first thing I'm going to do, you guys can see my line layer there and my paint layer below. I'm going to merge them just by shift selecting them and pushing Control E or Command E to merge. So now I'm painting on one layer, which means I can paint over my lines. You don't, this again is coming from my traditional background. You don't, in traditional, you can't just paint under your lines perfectly like you can digitally. You paint over them. So I like that, which is why I'm able to lay in such loose lines, because I'm going to refine the drawing as I paint. And that's another way of keeping yourself loose as you go. It's very common to do a finished line drawing and then start painting. I don't do that, however, because whenever I do that, I feel very connected to the line drawing. So I spent so much time on it, right? Here, I don't want to do that. I want to find my finished drawing as I work. So painting over a rough line drawing is how I foster that kind of interaction with my painting. Okay, let's get some sky in. So everything's just orangey sienna right now. So I'm going to pick a blue that I think will work for the sky and just start sketching this in. I'm going to switch my brush to something, I don't know, this one? I honestly don't know. One cool thing about Krita is these little icons that have the water. See the little water drops there?
Mm-hmm.
The ones that have the water drops, those are blending brushes. So like, say this brush here does not have a water drop. It'll go on pretty hard on your painting. Whereas the one that does have a water drop, like this guy, it will blend. Whoops, let me go back to the one I had before. This one, it'll kind of blend as it gets applied. And I like those brushes a lot because it'll interact with my underpainting here. So raise the opacity on these, I think, so you get a lot of that color that you're picking coming through. And I change my color a lot. I'll talk about that as I go. But right now what I'm doing is I'm just painting over my I did
by the way, Storm Engineer says that if you hold Control before click and draw the color picker docker, it will not dock.
Oh, what is it? If I hold Control and what?
Control before you click and draw the color picker.
Oh, look at
docker.
that. Thank you. That is a good tip. Thank you so much. Did not know about that one. It worked.
And they are the Storm Engineer you were thinking of.
Ah, yes. After I do a lot of, interaction on social media and stuff. Well, not so much on Discord anymore because I just don't have the time, but I learn to recognize people's nicknames. Okay. There's a little sky in there. Doesn't look like anything special, but trust me, it'll come together as I go. I'm going to paint the background hills. Now, the nice thing about depth is it becomes quite predictable from a color standpoint. We're all familiar with mountains that look blue in the background. They're not just blue though. They do have, let me bring in some reference here. They do have some variation. The thing that happens as you go into depth is, this is a better example. The blue increases because our atmosphere is generally blue, like our sky is, generally blue. Even when it's grayer, like in this photo, things will still fall to the blues as they go back. Yellows leave the atmosphere first, or yellows are the first to leave our spectrum of vision with depth. So as you go back, with the reduction of yellow, you get more reddish tones. And then as the red is like the second color to leave, then it essentially, if I look at the color picker, yellows leave first, and then like the reds leave, and then you basically progress more pinky and then finally to blue. So if you look at the reference, look at my painting, you notice that I have these blues intermingling with like these pinks, like neutral pinks. Even the rooftops. Can you see how the rooftops are more like orangey red at the front, but pinky red at the back? That's that's a consistency in how the color evolves as it goes through depth. If you look at the reference, it's the same kind of thing. If you look at those distant hills, I'll zoom in on this. Can you see like it's like pinky, like the trees that are not blue are like this pinky version of red? Even the rooftops, can you see how they're slightly getting pinker, whereas in the foreground they're more orangey? This is something that happens with light. It's a fascinating little thing. And the thing about being a painter is I have pretty limited understanding of why this happens. I haven't looked into it so much. I just know that it happens, and I know what it looks like, and I know how to paint it. Sometimes you can learn from like the science of things, and for sure I've looked into that stuff, but not as much as I've just tried to capture it visually. So it could be a shortcoming of mine that sometimes I don't exactly know why things happen. I just know that they do. Being on YouTube is cool though, because people post, people more technical and scientific than me post reasons for things all the time, and I learn from it, which is cool. So let's talk about color shifting. In this background, these background hills here, I'm picking colors anywhere in this cool range. It almost doesn't matter which color, because I've just kind of explained how color goes back as it's with depth. So as long as I'm in that sort of trajectory of color, I'm going to be okay. Because the cool thing about painting is I can always paint over it. So like if I am painting this blue and I'm like, oh, these hills are starting to look really, really blue and I need more variety. Well, I'm over here. I'll just like cycle my color picker up to these maybe pinkish purpley hues. And with my nice blending brush that I've selected, I can blend this in. And this is how I achieve, these little color shifts that you see in my paintings always. I always do this. This is not just for background hills. I do this all the time, and I'll show you as I work. Sometimes you want like really, really saturated blues back there. You notice that I have certain, I call them color notes, where you kind of zing in a bit of saturation there. This will just help. What this is going to do is it's going to help the warm colors pop once I start putting them in. And I think I'll actually switch back to my lights, my foreground stuff, which has a nice warm light. So like the rooftop here is going to be nice and warm green, which means it's going to be closer to the yellows. If any of you guys don't know, I have a YouTube channel where I have videos about warm versus cool and light versus shadow and shapes and all these things. So here in the live demo, I might say something like, oh, I'm painting a warm versus cool. Well, it's like, well, what does that mean? I could do a whole lecture on that, and that's where my YouTube channel comes in. So if anyone has specific questions, please do feel free to ask. But at the same time, also, I hope you can check out some of my YouTube videos where I explain this more thoroughly.
Yeah.
I'm working the intermediate tones here between light and shadow. And I'm trying to just soften the edge. I'm still using the same brush. This building here to the left of the round one is in shadow. So I'm going to pick a neutral, meaning grayish red. And what this is going to allow me to do when I'm in the neutral colors, I'm going to be able to kind of ping pong my way around to other colors, because when you're in the grays, in the neutrals, every color has gray in common. So because these colors, when you're in the grays, every hue is so close together because it's linked by this gray, I can kind of just pop into these blues here and put a few blue color notes around. I can pop into the whatever color that is, this pinkish thing, and put in these color notes. I can do the same thing on this building. Make sure your value is correct though. Value meaning the light or dark of it. And just start playing with these colors. It's much harder to do a color shift when your color is saturated. Like if I'm painting this fairly saturated rooftop, it's going to be harder. Like I can't just go into the red and paint red. It's going to look a little weird. Mm-hmm. But when you're in the grays, you can really, it's like a free for all almost. Like this color here is pretty gray. So I can like make it redder if I wanted and put it in. And like, it's got this nice harmonizing effect. Sometimes I think of it almost like, I have different metaphors for it in my head. One of them is like electricity. Sorry, I keep pushing a button that brings up this floating menu, which is very cool, by the way. If you right click, I think it is, I think maybe Storm Engineer can talk about this more. I think if you right click, it brings this up. Sometimes my undo button brings it up by accident. I don't know. But this little floating menu, you can pick your colors in here as well and access different brushes. It's very handy. Although, because I'm mostly a Photoshop user, Photoshop doesn't really have that, and I'm not used to it. So I don't really use it, but I think it is cool. I talk a lot. Are there any questions that I'm missing?
Do you have a Discord channel to join?
I do, but I will right away say that I'm not very active on it. But last I've heard, it's a good place that people are getting feedback. I don't even know the link to it. Maybe someone who's not painting right now, if someone knows the link, could you please paste it in the chat? My Discord. I don't know how I can get it quickly without actually like logging into Discord and finding the link.
Yeah, I think someone has done that already, and maybe YouTube sometimes likes to be picky and not let us send links in the chat. So just to test it out, and also so that we get some feedback if the links work, I'm going to share with you all in the chat our feedback survey link. And let me know if you can't get it, then that means YouTube is not allowing us to share links today.
Check this out. I'm using the line tool again, and I'm putting in some of these rooftops with a very thick line tool. By the way, the line tool will use whatever brush you have selected. So I went ahead and selected this sort of thin, like tapering paintbrush, which has I don't know, just a nice line, I think, to it. I'm going to make sure that I have some lights and darks in there because, like, say the rooftop here is dark because it's blocked. The light is being blocked by these buildings. So what I'm going to do is make sure the rooftop's in light, that the red is airing more on the orangey red. You can see me trying to push up those oranges. So like this might be the color of a rooftop in light, maybe a bit lighter than that. And then in shadow, I'll switch it this way because in shadow, this gets into a big lecture topic, but the sunlight is warm. This is a warm sun. The sun is always warm. It changes color. The sun changes temperature throughout the day. But in a late afternoon scene like this, the sun is pretty orangey yellow. It's something in this range. So it's gonna, whatever it hits, it's gonna bask it in that orangey glow. But in shadow, the sun is not hitting the shadows, of course. So you're gonna get more influence from the environment. And again, like I mentioned before, the environment is cooler. So anything in shadow, I'm gonna go down to the cools and put them in. So in shadow, I have license to go purple, pink, blue even. And here we go. I'm getting into the background rooftops. And I'm just using my line tool here. And you notice I'm painting very small shapes. As you can see in the reference, very small little rooftops. This relationship alone, big shapes to, progressing down to small shapes, will get you so much depth. And a lot of times, having been a teacher for a long time, I can tell you firsthand that one of the number one things I'm always correcting in my students' work is the range of shapes from big to small. A lot of people, myself included, when I was first learning this stuff, would kind of like just repeat the same size of shapes. I think it's very just human to want to repeat things, which I think helps in a lot of areas of our life, like maybe keeping a clean house. It's good to repeat habits, but in art, it leads to dull design and not effective shapes. And I am allergic seemingly to things that repeat too much in art. So I always try and add that variety in. Now, variety can come in different forms. Big, medium, small shapes is one, like I've talked about just a second ago. Also, things like warm versus cool. How about variety in terms of color shifts? There's so many little variety elements you can impart in your painting that will just bring it to life. And this holds true, by the way, for those of you who are more interested in full renders, which I am too. I do tightly rendered stuff too. Not all the time. I'm more a loose painter by just my personal aesthetic, but every now and then I'll feel the need, or the client will request me to do a tighter rendering. And even in those, like, you still need a full range of shapes from big to small. That's what just keeps your design interesting. Okay. Do we have a time limit, Noelia?
Yeah, we're 40 minutes in, so you have about 20-ish minutes, but we can go over another 10, I would say, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to say, if you want to get into the Q&A while I'm painting, feel free to do that. That's cool.
Will do. I think people are very interested in what you're doing and learning a lot, so
Oh,
there's not many questions.
okay.
Um, but how much of what you are doing in Krita will Procreate do? Do you
Oh,
know?
everything I'm doing in Krita, Procreate can do. Any app. I am purposely not using any special features. Like, I'm using the line tool right now. Every app has a line tool. I don't know exactly if it'll work exactly the same in every app, but every app will have a line tool that you can use like this. Like, you might have to be like, oh, I have to pick this brush for the line tool to work. Whereas in this app, I use this brush, like that stuff might change. But
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I'm using the line tool, that will be something, universal that you can apply. Changing brush size. I use the square bracket keys on my keyboard. That's also kind of a universal shortcut that is in Photoshop and Painter and Krita and all that stuff. All right. One thing I'm going to try here, and watch me fail. I'm going to try a selection. Is this the selection tool? Yeah. No, it's not. The selection tool is, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Swarm engineer, where's the selection tool? Is it this? Nope. Nope. Okay, maybe while I wait for an answer, I'll just keep painting.
By the way, they have more insight for
You know what I'm gonna do? Check this out. I want to make this foreground darker. So I'm gonna make a new layer with the plus button. I'm gonna set that layer to multiply, which is here. You click this little thing here and set it to, you can have different layers. I'm gonna use multiply, which is this darkens things. Now I'm gonna go into my paint brushes here, or I'll go into maybe all, and I'm gonna find an airbrush, just something thick, something like, let's see, maybe not an airbrush, like maybe a marker like this, like a thick marker, anything that's big. I'll set the opacity low and maybe a little higher. And I'm going to just darken this entire foreground. So the nice thing about this multiply mode is, see, it keeps my reds intact. It keeps my colors intact. It just darkens everything. So I'm just going to darken this. And I'm even going to, there's some dark sort of plants here, bushes and trees. I'm just going to get myself set up for those by darkening them. The color you pick matters. Like if you pick this blue, it'll kind of darken, toward the blue.
Mm-hmm.
This is like watercolor washes. For those of you who use watercolors, watercolor basically darkens the page. So no matter which, so you mix up something with watercolor, and then it'll darken the page to that color. This multiply mode is largely the same thing. By the way, if once I'm done, I'll merge this. I'll just select the two layers, Command E or Control E to merge them. You can also set brushes to multiply. That was a layer, but if I want this brush to be multiply, I can do it up here. Click normal, click multiply, and now my brush is set to multiply mode, and I'm still working on one layer. So this is a handy little feature. Again, every software will have the ability to make layers that are on different modes like multiply, and make brushes that go to different modes. So I'm on my multiply mode, and I am just putting in some pretty heavy blues in the background. And you notice I'm putting those blues kind of around the focal point, which is these buildings here, because I want those focal point buildings to pop. And as I mentioned in the slideshow, when I showed you that awning painting, a great tool to make your focal point pop is give it the most give it the most contrast, and then have your contrast be reduced for other things. The eye is addicted to contrast. That's what our eye is built to see. Our eye is made to notice contrast before anything else. Contrast of lights and darks. We notice colors secondary to that. We notice, we identify what the object is secondary to that. Contrast is what draws our eye, which is, how like magicians use sleight of hand. They give your eye something contrasty to trick it to looking at while they do something else hidden in the background. Art is kind of like a magic trick where, especially with these plein air sketches, if I show the viewer something very high in contrast, I can almost predict that they will 100% of the time go to this area and they may not notice this area so much. So like I can maybe keep this a bit looser and keep this tighter and higher in contrast and this lower in contrast. And that's a great way to get a sketch reading very quickly. So that's another, this harkens back to that question about tight versus loose. In tight paintings, you kind of want to render more things. That's what gives it the tightness, is more rendering. But in loose paintings, you have this unique opportunity to play with different levels of finish. So remember, loose doesn't mean that everything is unfinished. It just means that maybe your focal point is more finished than everything else. And you have to determine on a composition level what that focal point is. And I've been hopefully clear that it's these buildings here. So I'm going to spend the most time on that. And I do this even in a tighter painting. I will still, as a workflow, I will render my, I'm switching out a multiply here. I will render my focal point first, even in a tight painting, get that working. And then I will switch to other areas. Because even in a tight painting, you still probably want your focal point to be the most rendered thing.
Right. That's awesome advice. By the way, the selection tools are those at the bottom. That are dotted.
Oh yeah, there they are. There, of course. See, when I'm live streaming like this, yeah, that's it. When I'm live streaming, I panic because I don't want to spend time searching too much. So thank you for that. Maybe I'll use the selection tool in a moment. What I want to do now, you see this floaty tower? When I say floaty, it kind of looks like it's not strong enough. Watch this. All this needs is some dark accents and it will pop. First, let me just rough in the shape of the roof here. I don't care if it goes above the frame. It's kind of cool, actually. This tower looks like it's not living in the space yet, but all it needs, I think, is just maybe a few color shifts. Let me get back to my my water dot brush, which the blending one. Turn down the opacity. Look at that nice blending. It's like wash painting or something. Okay, yeah. Dark accents. I'm gonna pick a dark color and raise my opacity on my brush, and just a few of these, what I call dark accents. A dark accent, if you think of a highlight, that to me is a light accent. A dark accent is just the opposite. It's like the opposite of a highlight, a darker version of a highlight. Just a few of these will help root this tower in space. Whoops, that's way too much. Reduce the opacity here. I want to get this soft kind of shadow under the rooftops, and also a rooftop next to it. And maybe just some foliage or some trees that are dark. Oops, see if I can, oh, this actually would be a good chance to change my brush to multiply mode and get this tower to be a little bit darker. Hang on, let me switch my brush here. Get this tower to be a bit darker at the bottom. There we go. Because at the bottom of this tower, it's getting less light from the environment. The light from the environment will filter its way into things that are very exposed to the environment. So like this part of the tower that I'm circling here is very exposed to the sky. It's very open to the air. But this part of the tower, this bottom part, is not nearly as exposed to the air. It's hidden by bushes and rooftops. So the tower is going to get progressively darker as it goes down. And that is also a great way to root things, especially buildings. If you look at buildings, anywhere in shadow specifically, typically you'll see them lighter near the sky and darker near the ground, because the sky is accessing more of the building up top where it's open to the air and less of that building near the ground. So you get this kind of gradient. And I'm just scribbling in, these aren't, this is not detail, but some small shapes to indicate maybe how that tower is built. When I do these plein air sketches, and this is true for anything I do outdoors, I'm way less interested in how the thing is built and more interested in the light that's hitting it. Sometimes though, that's just to go on a tangent here. Sometimes that's not true. Sometimes I'll want to study how things are built. A good example of this would be like figure drawing when you're studying anatomy. If I'm doing an anatomy study, I'm less interested in producing a finished piece of art and more interested in like studying how the bicep works or whatever muscle you're studying. And then later you combine them. So sometimes when I'm outdoors painting landscapes, I'm really interested in like exactly how the columns of this building are aligned. And I'll do like a focused line drawing study. But in this case, I'm not doing that. In this case, I'm just trying to capture the fleeting shapes that I see in front of me, or I should say the fleeting light that's hitting these shapes that I see in front of me. And then I can move on. I really, really love painting outdoors because, well, it's just fun to do this stuff. Like you feel so liberated out there, especially if you can
Mm-hmm.
find a nice spot where there's not a whole lot of traffic. A lot of people, including me, are a bit turned off by a lot of people walking around them and looking at what they're painting.
Yep.
A tip for that is work small. If you work small, way fewer people will notice you're even painting and therefore will pay less attention to you, which is another great reason to use that small etcher pack because it looks like a snack bag or something. No one knows that it's painting supplies. Um, and just you can work very discreetly with that type of stuff.
So true.
Yeah.
Quick question. What does
Yep.
the multiply layer do exactly?
Oh, so just a quick, it darkens things. So if I make a new layer, set it to multiply mode here, you pick a color like this blue, watch this. It'll just darken everything to that blue. See that? It's making everything darker and bluer. Or if I pick this red, it'll make it darker and redder. Let me undo that or just trash the layer. You can throw out a layer with this trash button here. And so multiply, think of multiply like painting with watercolor. It darkens whatever's on the page.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Here I'm putting some really, really strong, well, relatively strong blues into the most extreme background. This is the most distance that we see in this picture gets the most blue. The lightest blue, oh, except for the sky, it's the lightest blue and the most saturated blue. And you notice it's not coloring book. Like I'm not filling it completely. I'm letting those colors be broken color, and put in some of these pinkish hues, which are, I'm not, oh, I haven't even really looked at reference this whole time except for my painting. But if you look, I'm looking at some of those trees in the distance that are just giving me these little shapes of warmer tones. I want to put that in. Shout out to the photographer's name is Dave Dean here. I want to make sure that Mr. Dave Dean gets credit. I don't know Dave, but I do love I was on his blog and I pulled that photo. Okay. That's the other thing with painting from life is you build up such a library of imagery in your head that oftentimes you find that when you're painting on the computer, you feel very liberated because you don't need so much reference. Reference is okay. It's not like the goal is not to use reference. That's not the goal. But the less you need reference, the more free you are to create. And really where I think you want to get to is you want to use reference just as inspiration, not something to be copied. Whereas when you're first starting out, and this will be true for everyone, if you're just starting out, you will feel the need to copy your reference because you won't have your own thought of what it should look like yet. But the more you paint from life, I promise you this is true, the more you paint from life, the more that your own image, your own version, how do I say this? The more you'll develop your own version of what you think the world should look like, and the more you'll be able to just plug that in rather than rely on reference. And then reference then just becomes inspiration. Like, oh, nature's doing this. That's cool. I can like riff on that. It's kind of like how a musician learns the scales. And once you can like learn scales, you can improvise and you can play jazz and you can solo, or painting from life is like learning the scales. And the thing with nature and with light and shadow is it's very predictable. Like light works the same all the time. It's not like light changes from morning to night. The quality of light changes from morning to night, but the way light works is always the same. So if you get used to capturing light from all times of day, you will be able to pull that information out of your own memory and be very free with your creations. So when I'm painting this Prague sketch, and indeed when I'm outside in real life, even though I'm looking at a piece of reference, which is right in front of me in real life, I'm still redesigning it based on how I think it can look. Remember that nature is not an artist. Nature is beautiful, maybe perfect, I don't know. Nature is beautiful, but nature is not an artist. Nature will give you shapes that need to be simplified in order to work in your painting. Nature will give you shapes that outright don't work in a painting. They're too complex or they're too meandering or too this or too that, too big, too small, whatever. Nature will give you all kinds of stuff that you have to edit. I think it's a mistake to copy too much. Even if at first you feel the overwhelming desire to copy, that's okay. You will go through that phase. Eventually, you'll learn that most of nature needs to be edited in order to work in a painting, even a tight painting.
That is actually an awesome segue to a question in the chat.
Yes, please.
Kapil, if I mispronounce your name, I'm so sorry, but Kapil asks this question. Marco, did you had any problem in choosing the art style, like realistic versus stylistic, in the early days of your career?
A good question. I was talking to Anya about this in our Etcher chat last week.
Yes, I just listened to that. I was about to bring that up too.
Yeah, I think I gave a better answer there than I will be able to here because I'm trying to also paint. But it's a very good question. My answer generally is, I don't think you have a choice so much as you think. Your personality heavily dictates that, and a big part of learning art, is you learn the fundamentals that will eventually allow you to let out your own inherent personality. You already have a personality. Everyone does. Everyone here has their own unique personality. I have a 17-month-old daughter. She has her own personality already. We all have it. What you learn with the fundamentals of art, when I say fundamentals, I mean like perspective and color temperature and value and composition. When you learn that stuff, eventually what all that does is it allows you to do what already is inside of you to do. And that, I think, is largely predetermined. I didn't choose to paint like this. It's just the way that I naturally went. I don't know how else to say it. This is not to say that I'm not capable of other styles. I am. I've been forced to be capable of other styles because if you work as a professional artist, clients might request all kinds of stuff, right? And you have to some degree, you want to be able to accommodate the different clients you're going to encounter. So I can do other styles, including like realistic, fully rendered stuff. But my natural way, like if you just left me alone and gave me a sketchbook, which basically I'm simulating here, I want to paint like this. I want to paint sketches that are true to life, but are very aesthetically designed. And that has been something that has been inside me all the time. I remember back when I was a kid taking piano lessons, my piano teacher would give me a piece of music and I would want to change it. Like I would want to learn it and then I would change it into my own thing. And my piano teacher actually told me that's what I was doing. And she told me like, that's a very special thing, but it's also kind of dangerous because you don't want to change things before you know the fundamentals, before you know why they work the way they're intended to work. So like with nature, you really want to be able to study nature before you change it. And when I say change it, I mean like going real sketchy like this. You want to practice this stuff, but you also want to practice a line drawing that is, more accurate in terms of its perspective and stuff like that. Like maybe you want to take a photo like this and draw more faithfully what's here, and then try and draw your own version like this. Both will inform the other. And just getting back to the question, which is a very good question, and I'm sorry I'm fumbling through it. Your own personality will come out over time, and you won't even be able to control it because it's already inside of you.
Awesome. And I'm just dropping the link to the podcast in the chat so that you can listen to that answer said in the podcast. Yeah. I listened to it the other day and I enjoyed the podcast very much.
Oh, thanks, Noelia. Yeah, I said it much better in the podcast.
It still makes sense though. And a lot of people in the chat were saying, yeah, you're spot on with that answer. I guess they can relate.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I've noticed. I think the cool thing about teaching is you see a lot of patterns. I don't think I would have been able to know that answer if I wasn't a teacher, because sure, I went through it, but who's to say, like, just because you go through something, it doesn't mean that everyone else has that experience. But when you teach, you see like hundreds, in my case, thousands of students develop, and you see the same patterns over and over. So you eventually you can draw the conclusion like, oh, this is some kind of truth that's bigger than just me. And that's one of them. Anyway, This area that I'm circling is completely blank. It's okay because it's kind of the right value. It's kind of the right level of brightness or darkness. But now I can just start adding in these little houses and stuff. Noelia, how much time do we have left?
That's what I was about to point out. It's like you read my mind. We have about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Do you mind if I ask you a few more questions while you keep
Please.
working?
Let's rapid fire questions. Yes.
Awesome. Do you ever do adjustment layers at the end of your paintings or just your original colors?
Yes, I do. That's a good question. Every now and then you get kind of this myopia set in, which means like you get tunnel visioned into what you're creating, and it's hard to know if it can be better with an overhaul. So see, here's in Krita, if you went to filter, I'm not as used to the adjustment layers here, but like, for example, color balance, if you go to filter, adjust color balance, I could turn up the cyan and the shadows, maybe turn up the yellow and the lights. Can you guys see what that's doing? Maybe play with some of this. I don't actually want to do this to this particular sketch, but in general, I do kind of go through some basic, like, levels is another one I use. This can help. Wait, why isn't that doing it? There we go. It just can help pop things out, can help make your darks darker. Like, this is kind of nice, making the darks a bit darker here. So yes, I do go through adjustment layers and filters like that in my work. I almost do it all the time. Like, whenever I do a painting, it's pretty rare that I'll not try and experiment with that stuff. After all, it's digital paint. We have these abilities to do it. Why not try it? But you know what? I kind of have a little hack. I do this traditionally too. Instagram filters are so good that when I'm working traditionally on my easel, I'll snap a photo of my painting, throw it into Instagram, not to post it, but just to play with the filters. And I'll say like, oh, that looks cool. That looks cool. And then I'll like do it to the actual painting. So it's like, I'll use technology to kind of like nudge me a certain way. I think digital tools are really excellent for improving and color correcting images. And any photograph, professional photograph or film you see has been heavily color graded. And I definitely think you can learn a lot from that kind of thing. Okay, that was a long answer. Is there another question?
Yes. Do you like to use digital tricks like blending modes and filters, or do you recommend to draw everything without them, like picking colors?
Yeah, so this links with what I was just talking about. I do use filters as I just showed, but in terms of like layer blending modes, other than multiply every now and then, or sometimes overlay is another one, I don't really use them that much. I want to put a tower here. There's a big open space here that I think could be, there's also a tower in my reference there that I liked compositionally. Yeah, I don't use them so much. I'm more just one layer, draw on one layer kind of thing, because it keeps my brain fresh. It also keeps the painting fresh. The thing with layers, and this is not a rule for those who like using layers, that's totally cool. And I use them sometimes too, but the thing about keeping your painting on one layer is it imbues this sort of freshness into the process, because you don't have anything to play with. Like, technically, when you have a lot of layers, you'll probably start getting into like adjusting little opacities and filters on different layers. And certainly there is a time and place for that for me. But usually if I'm just painting something for my own well-being like this, I almost never use that kind of stuff. Almost. The keyword there is almost never. I do sometimes, but in this case, I'm not going to.
Makes sense. Another question. For visual development, which fundamentals do you think a student should deep study first?
Big, medium, small shapes. Okay, so just to quickly, big, medium, small shapes. Actually, let me get rid of that. For every big shape, here's a big shape. This is not a rule, but this is how I think. For every big shape, you are given some medium-sized shapes. And because, big shapes, you only have room for a few of them because your canvas is only so big. So you have like one or two big shapes, you have more medium shapes, and then you have a lot more small shapes. Study this ratio. Now, I'm not saying the ratio that I'm putting forth is mathematically perfect. Like, I'm not saying, hey, for every one big shape, you get 4 medium shapes, you get 20 small. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there is a ratio of big, medium, small shapes that benefits your composition. Study this. Start by looking at what I'm doing. Can you see how my painting roughly follows this model? I have way fewer big shapes. Like a big shape might be this building here. The light of that building is one of the bigger shapes. Maybe this background mountain, that's a pretty big shape. The sky is a pretty big shape. I only have a few of them. I have far more medium shapes, like these rooftops. Those are medium-sized shapes to me. And then small shapes are like the background rooftops, all these little, if you look at my finished sketch up the top, might be a better representation of what I'm talking about. But all these little chimneys and, little details on things, little highlights, those are small shapes, and there's way more of them. So if you are learning about concept art and just composition, because a big part of concept art is your ability to compose your picture, and also just make a pleasing concept for your client, look into big, medium, small shape distribution. I do plan to make a YouTube video on that in the future, by the way, so I haven't done that yet.
Ooh, we'll have to check it out. Before I ask the last few questions, I just wanted to encourage everyone to sign up for your mini workshop where you will be doing more digital paint, right? But this time for focusing on portraits.
Yeah, portrait / like character related stuff. Because we're doing landscapes here. Why not switch to a different type of subject matter for the mini workshop? Yeah.
Yeah. So make sure you sign up. It's only $5.50. So if you want to support Marco and learn a little bit more from him, go ahead and sign up.
And I hope to see you there.
Yeah, I'm also throwing in our survey link because we would love to hear your feedback. And I'll throw another question at you, Marco.
Please.
What tips do you have for students who always have vast amounts of creative work to do and find it difficult to avoid burnout?
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh boy, I haven't been a student at a school in a long time, so it's been a while since I've experienced that. But I do experience burnout as a creator, like making YouTube videos almost monthly is a huge source of creative burnout for me, even though I love it. What I do is I try and give myself manageable tasks each day. So I'm like, oh, I have this in January. I made a YouTube video that's my biggest production yet. I'll be posting it on Monday morning for those who are following my channel. I have a new video Monday. It took me so long to make that video and so many steps, and it was overwhelming. But what I did was every day I'm like, okay, I am going to get this done today. This one thing, like I'm going, this section of this 1 minute section or whatever it is that your project demands, and give yourself the ability to just get that one thing done and be okay with it. Like, even if it's not perfect, as long as you get that one thing done, give yourself permission to be like, all right, let's have a pizza or something. I'm good. I did my thing today. Now, if you're overwhelmed by like a lot of classwork, I don't know what I recommend there, because it's like you have to do your classwork. I'm not going to say don't do it, but if at all possible, try to be. I'm going to sound like a dad here. Just try and be extra responsible with your schedule. Don't go out if you have a ton of stuff to do the next day and you're going to cram it all in one day if you go out tonight. Well, no one's going out these days, but you know what I mean? Just be responsible with it. And I learned this from having a child, where I only have so many hours in the day now that I can work. It's been dramatically reduced because of my daughter. And don't get me wrong, I love my daughter, but she has killed my productivity. I just try and map it out. I have I just pull out some Post-it notes, make some notes in the morning, like this is what I'm going to get done today. And I do it. Even if it means staying up a bit later, I'll do that. But anyway, I don't think that's super insightful advice, but that's what I have to say on that.
No, that makes sense. And I think that's how I approached my college career too, when I had too much to do and was getting burnt out because I studied art as well. But
oh, good. Yeah. Anyway, are there any other questions in there?
Last question before we leave. Do you think college is necessary to work as an artist in art industry?
Well, I have to say no, because I didn't go to college for art. I went to college, but not for art. I studied film and writing. So I didn't study painting, but I do think that the environment of a college is very beneficial. So even though I didn't go to college for art, having gone to a university here in Toronto, Canada, I know that it really helped me to work with other students on, in our case, we're doing film projects, but like just working on creative stuff with other students without the burden of trying to be professional. Because like when you're a student, or no, I should say when you're a professional, it can add a bit of stress to the job because like a client is expecting you to perform. That's stressful. It's still stressful. I've been a professional since 2005. It's still stressful when a client emails me being like, hey, Marco, we want you to do this thing for us. And like, the more you work, the bigger your clients are like. So like if I'm getting an email from like Magic the Gathering, and they're like, hey, Marco, here's a huge crowd scene to paint for us. That's intimidating. Like I'm still intimidated by that. I know I have the skills to do it, but the cool thing about being a student at a college is that pressure is off. And I think that's really a great environment to foster your learning and your development. And then when you get eventually become a professional, you're going to be thrust into a very different environment, and you're going to miss the days of student time when maybe you didn't have to satisfy the needs of anyone but yourself. Really, well, you have your professors, but like there's going to be some more lenience if you're doing because when you're a student, you're learning, you're able to practice things more. The sandbox is bigger. I do think that's valuable. So my answer is two-pronged. Is it necessary to go to college to become an artist? No. But does it help? I think yes. And everyone is going to have different experiences there. Some people, I think, would say it's absolutely essential. But for me, I have to be honest and say, for me, it wasn't. I didn't go that route. But I did value the experience of having gone to a college myself.
Awesome. And I can agree with that answer as well. And I think some people in the chat do as well. Maybe storm engineer is one of them.
Oh, good.
I have one more question for you before we officially end. But I just wanted to remind everyone to give us your feedback. We would appreciate it. Don't forget to sign up for the mini workshop. And if you want to share any of your artwork with us, we would love to see it. Tag us with #@yourminiworkshop. And the last question.
Yeah.
Do you prefer this over an iPad and Photoshop versus Procreate? I know, or Danny knows, this isn't your usual software, but could you do work on Procreate for studios?
Oh yeah, for sure. A lot of artists actually do that, use Procreate for studios. The only reason I use Photoshop is because I've used it literally for 23 years now. I think I got my first version of Photoshop in like 97.
Wow, that's
so
when I was born.
Yeah, so I'm old, by the way. I know Photoshop so well that I just can't, like, the gap is so large for me to switch softwares now because I just know Photoshop so well. It's like speaking a native language versus learning a new language for me.
Right.
So I stick to it. But if I were starting today, digital painting today, I probably would not use Photoshop. I probably would use Krita or Procreate. Procreate's amazing. And I've used it professionally before as well, just in a very limited capacity. I know that was the last question, but can I just point out one thing about color?
Yeah.
I think that I didn't say this. Remember earlier I was saying in shadows, you are free of the warm light. Look how liberal you can be with color. Like these rooftops are red, right? But like I put blues on them, and you can see it in my sketch there too. You can be so free in shadow colors because the environment, remember that your environment is shining color into your shadows. And often those colors are cooler because the sky is blue. It's shining this blue light into your red rooftops in shadow. So even though those rooftops are red, I'm able to go into like these purples or like even these blues, as long as you get your values right, meaning your lights versus darks. I can't do like this is way too dark, right? Let's get your values right. You can have so much fun. Like I can go up here. It doesn't really matter. It'll still look like a red roof so long as you're able to, as long as you keep enough of that red in there. But this is where you can have a lot of fun with color. So I just want to emphasize that in shadow, you can really, really play with your color and feel free to experiment with that. As long as your value is correct and as long as your shape is good, your color can be very free. I think a lot of people get a little nervous about color. And I'm here to say that you don't need to be. Values and shapes are far more important than your color. And hopefully I've gotten far enough in the sketch today to give some insight into the process and into maybe some art stuff in general. And I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Is there any closing words, Noelia?
Other than thank you everyone for answering your own questions in the chat. You are all amazing. And Marco, people are thanking. There are a lot of thank yous in the chat. Excellent demo, great. They enjoyed it a lot.
Oh,
Um,
well, thank you everyone for coming. Sorry, I didn't say that when I was talking a second ago. Thank you everyone for coming.
yeah, same from me, and hope to catch you in Marco's mini workshop on February 15th and in other live demos.
Yeah, February 15th, guys. Hope to see you there. Also on Monday, go to my YouTube channel, Monday afternoon. I will have a brand new video that took me forever to make, so please watch it.
Go check that out, guys and gals.
Thanks,
Um,
Storm Engineer, for your help.
yes, thank you so much. And we will see you on the next one.
Oh, wait, I got to sign my name. There we go. Marco.
Yay!
Thanks, guys. Everyone, happy creating, and I'll see you in another demo.
Yep. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.